Well, hello everyone. Well, today's video is going to be within the theme of getting your teen to listen to you. And specifically, we're going to talk about an example. The example is going to be you're at the dinner table, your teen's on their phone, and you ask them to put down their phone and engage with the family a little bit. So that's the scenario where you've asked them to do something and they aren't listening to you. But I will say this, today I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I'm going to throw out a different perspective, maybe a different way of looking at this particular situation that I believe will really help to open this up and make this work better for you and your family going forward. So let's get started. Let's dig into some different perspectives. Well, hello again, everyone. My name is Jim White, and I'm an author, coach, and the founder of the Family Enrichment Academy. And today, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about getting your teen to listen to you, and specifically around an example of sitting at the dinner table and the teenager being on the phone. But before we jump into that, I wanted to share with you a free resource that I have as well. Another very common question that's kind of related to this one is getting your teen to open up and talk more. I get questions all the time from parents, how do I get my teen to open up and talk more? And quite simply, the first and most fundamental thing that you can do is you can ask better questions. And so this free resource I have 10 questions you should never ask your teenager. Think of these as like conversation killers. And then I've got another 10 questions that are great questions that are like conversation starters. So again, this is a free resource. I'll put the link below. You can click on that and we'll shoot it over to you. So back to our situation of getting the teen to listen when you ask them to put down their phone at the dinner table. Well, today I'm going to share a couple things. First of all, we're going to really challenge you to look at this situation different, to adopt a different perspective. And then what we're going to follow up with after that is from this different perspective, how might you act differently or approach this scenario differently when you look from this alternate perspective that we're going to talk about? So let's dive into that. First, we'll talk about this new way of looking at this scenario and maybe shift your mindset a little bit around it. So let's jump into that first. So you're sitting at the dinner table, your teenager has their phone out. They're on their phone and you say to them, hey, let's put the phone away. We're going to have a family dinner tonight. And they don't. So that's the scenario we're talking about, where they're not listening to do or not honoring that request that you've made. And so there's a couple of things I'd like to share with you. First of all, from a perspective standpoint, and we talk about this in a lot of our videos, this idea of control versus empowerment. If you think about it, when you ask them to do that, the first instinct is to try to control the situation and just make them put their phone down. But again, I'd like to challenge you to think differently with your teenager. It's about empowerment, or a lot of times parents like to use the idea of influence. And so the goal is to influence them to set their phone down and engage with the family and be a part of the family activity. But here's the kicker, and this is what you need to think about. Think about that. The fact that they're not doing that is really a signal or a symptom of a bigger problem. This is a sign that you need to work on something else more fundamental before you can start to influence them. And what that is you have to build connection with them. I challenge parents to think about that. If you really want to influence or empower your teenager, you can't do that unless you've built a really solid foundation around connection. And so if this becomes an issue and you find that your teen isn't listening, it's just a signal or symptom that that connection needs to be deepened a little bit. So that's where we need to head with this. How can we deepen and develop that connection first? We do that work, and then the influence and the empowerment is going to naturally happen. And then the other thing I would throw out for you, if the teenager's feeling disconnected, they feel like they're not being heard. And that's another thing that creates this resistance to follow your request in this scenario or engage with the family. If they feel, and I would throw this out for you, if they feel connected and they feel like they're heard and that they are part of the family, again, you think that they are, but maybe they feel that disconnect. But once they feel that, I would like to throw out that they will be reasonable and their teenager will act in a reasonable way and they will be responsible. But that connection is critical. You got to start there, build connection. So now that we've got this little shift in mindset away from just trying to control the situation to, okay, maybe that's a sign that I need to build and deepen connection. Let's talk for a few minutes about some strategies for building connection with your teen and actually how it might relate to the phone, and we could even broaden that a little bit into social media as well. So let's take a look at how you might act or change your approach with this new perspective. So now that we have this different perspective where we're going to work on building connection, I'm actually going to break this into two parts. First part being more what I call preventative maintenance or building connection just in general. And then secondly, we'll talk about some opportunity to build connection around this specific issue of the phone and the phone at dinner time. So anyway, let's talk a little bit first about preventative maintenance and just building connection with your teenager in a general sense. In other videos, I've shared a variety of different strategies, but today I thought I might share this in my book. I like to call it the process of being kind. And what that really is I've sort of built that around and used the foundation of the 5 love languages as a cornerstone of this idea of being kind. If you're familiar with the 5 love languages, what they are, first of all, is words of affirmation, physical touch, quality time, acts of service, and gifts. Those are the 5 different love languages. And the premise is that you think about your teenager and what seems to sort of engage them or have them really feel like that you love them, that you're communicating that love. For example, my oldest son, I think he really connects with words of affirmation. Either telling him that, I believe that he can do something or that I know that he can accomplish it, or after he's done something to acknowledge that, say, man, you must feel really good about what you've just done. So those words of affirmation seem to really connect with him and communicate to him that there's love there and that we're connected. And then another example, our youngest daughter, hers seem to be acts of service, to do something for her or to help her with a project. That's what seems to make her tick a little bit more. So my challenge to you, and again, this is preventative maintenance and building connection, is to think about your son or daughter and which one of those love languages seem to speak to them the most, and then be very intentional about trying to incorporate some of that in your day-to-day interactions with them. And as you do that, you'll build and deepen that connection, again, as preventative maintenance or a foundation for being able to influence or empower them later on down the road. So think about 5 love languages and how you can build connection through those. And again, those are words of affirmation, physical touch, quality time, acts of service, or gifts. So think about that for a minute. And now let's take a look and jump into the idea of what you can do around this specific topic and using it as a way to build connection as well. So now let's talk about how you can use this particular circumstance or situation as a way to build connection with your teenager. So again, the dinner table, the phone being out, and you trying to get them to put down their phone and engage with the family, that's the circumstance that we're dealing with. And so here's what I would throw out. Again, think empowerment versus control. And if you were coming from that control mindset, you'd be saying, okay, here's the rules. We're going to not have the phone at the dinner table. Maybe there's other rules around the phone. At 10 o'clock at night, the phone goes away. You've got these hard and set rules that you've come up with. And that's an example of trying to control the situation. What I would invite you to do is, as you build connection, and a way to use this scenario as a way to build connection is to invite your teenager into the process of co-creating a plan or a set of guidelines for the phone and how they use their phone within the home and around the family. And the key is the co-creation of it. And as you go through that process, now what some parents will say, well, that means I'm just giving in to everything that they say. And that's not what I'm talking about here. There's a real power in just being heard. If your teenager has the opportunity to share some of their thoughts around the subject and they feel heard, it doesn't mean that they have to get their way or for their way to be the only way to move forward. And so the premise is that you engage with them. And maybe you start by being a little bit vulnerable. You say, we've had some issue. I just want to acknowledge we've had some issue around the phone. It's become a point where we've argued and fought, and I don't like that. And I really want to try to make it work better for both of us, but sometimes I'm just not sure what to do. But what I thought we might do is co-create. Maybe let's talk about and come up with a plan, and this is the key right here, these words, a plan that works for both of us. And that's the key thing. And you invite your teenager and you say to them, I'm willing to engage and hear what your thoughts and concerns are, but you have to be willing to engage and listen to mine as well. We want a plan that works for both of us. And so you open that up. Start to have a conversation about, what would be reasonable when it comes to the phone. How would we deal with it at dinner time? Does it make sense that maybe we would have some time at dinner where we can just talk and engage without your phone being there? How would that work? And so again, just engage, and your goal is to be curious first of all, and ask them, what are their thoughts? Let them come up with some stuff. It doesn't have to be solved in one night. Keep in mind too, maybe it takes a few days to work through this, and you could say to them, that's some interesting thoughts. Let me think about that a little bit. Maybe you can think about a little bit too, and let's get back together tomorrow and talk some more about this. The point is to have a conversation and work towards a plan, again, that works for both of you. In doing that, the building connection component is your teenager is going to feel heard. They're going to feel like they're part of the scenario, or they're part of the solution, if you will, and it's not just being dictated to them and you trying to control them. So it really helps to build that trust and that connection if you can approach it that way. And so that's the challenge, is throw that out. If there still seems to be resistance, I'll just go back here. If it doesn't seem like you can't get to there, circle back to building connection again, the foundational stuff outside of the conversation around the phone. But I would assert that if you can, I would challenge you to maybe open up to the possibility that if with just a little bit of conversation, you might be surprised by how much they're willing to engage with you if they start to feel like their opinions and their thoughts are being listened to as well. So that's the fundamental way you can build some connection around this topic or issue, is try to co-create a plan with your teenager for how the phone is used within the phone or within the family, and the way that they engage with the family at, let's say, dinner time. So give it some thought. I promise you, give it a little bit of work, you might be surprised at what happens. So all right, let's do a quick recap of what we've talked about today. So we started off, this scenario is that you're at the dinner table, your teenager has the phone out, and you to ask them to put it down and engage with the family. And again, this is within that theme of them listening to you. And what I shared earlier is to maybe think about that and look at that from a different perspective, to see that if they resist and don't want to put their phone down or argue with you about it, that's really a sign or a signal that there's a deeper issue, and it's all around building connection. And again, you can't hope to influence or empower them to make a different choice or act more responsibly until you've deepened that connection. So that's the first step, is that shift in perspective. And then we also talked about a couple of ways to help to deepen that connection. One, first of all, that's more foundational, was the idea of trying to speak to them and engage with them through their particular love language a little bit, and be very intentional about that. And then secondly, we talked about using this particular scenario as a way to co-create a plan for the phone. And through that process of co-creating a plan, you build connection by engaging with them in a way that allows them to share their thoughts and opinions and be a part of the solution, again, so that they feel heard. So that's going to go a long way towards building connection. So anyway, that's a quick recap of what we've shared today, and hopefully I completely hope that you find some value and some ideas in those strategies and ideas that we've shared today. Before we sign off, I just want to remind everybody that I've got that free resource, those 10 questions you should never ask your teenager, the conversation killers, and then those 10 great questions, the conversation starters. So be sure to click the link below and we'll share that resource with you. Again, it's truly an honor and a privilege to be able to work with you and hopefully provide some value and some insights for you that you can use as you move along your parenting journey. And actually, I would love to hear if there's anything, what was the biggest takeaway that you might have had from this particular video. Share that in the comments below. It's always great for us as a community to share that kind of information. So anyway, as always, it's a pleasure. And again, I like to remind everybody that a change in perspective changes everything.